Dude, I don't know, man. I don't believe in truth, so.
We have to start it.
Cool.
Alright, hello. Welcome to Chill Philosophy. I'm Jacob Blue, and with me I have,
Oh, hello there. Sorry, I thought about doing like the book thing where like, oh, hello.
Oh my gosh.
I'm Noah. Nice to meet you. Cool.
Alright, today we're going to be talking about the big question. Truth. What is it? What does it mean?
I thought we were going to ask if ketchup was actually a soup.
It's a smoothie.
A smoothie, gotcha.
Right. So, why don't we start things off with the main point? What do you think truth is, Noah?
Was this an interview or a discussion?
It's a discussion. I'm just asking you.
Okay, what? No. What is truth? Truth would be... I would say truth is a quality associated with a certain thing. So you could say that a statement about reality is truthful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something is true whenever it lines up with reality itself.
Okay.
And you can make true statements, so it becomes a quality given to a statement if it is something that lines up with reality,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a lie. So.
Okay. So, something that lines up with reality.
Exactly.
Right. I think I would have the same opinion.
You're gonna disagree with me? Come on, let's make this. Let's make this a
Disagree
fight.
with me?
Fight.
Well, are you the opposite?
What?
Okay. Yeah, I would say, I think truth is something that kind of exists while in our world, but kind of outside of it. Like what you said. I'm trying to put this. Frick, man. I'm trying to put this. It's like...
I would say also attached to the question is, what is reality, right? Built into the question, because you have to think about, okay, reality. You can make a statement that, you can make a truthful statement like, I went to work today.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to like defining what is reality, then you have to talk about the box that is it just the physical world? Is there anything transcendent or anything outside of reality? I think most would agree that like the issue of like a true statement or whatever, that's not controversial.
Mm-hmm.
But when discussing what reality is, and therefore what is a true statement about reality, that's when things get dicey.
Okay, yeah. I think, back to what I think truth is. I think truth is, exists in our world, but something that is not changing, because then it wouldn't be true. It would be changing.
Like ideals or whatever?
Yeah, So, like, it's kind of concepts that we can think about, but maybe not fully comprehend. Like, maybe the idea of morals. I think there's a truth to that.
Yeah.
That there's a set of non-changing morals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the moral good, like virtue is striving to line up with what is morally good, right?
Yeah. Mm.
So virtue is a particularly human quality because we're striving to line up with what is morally good.
Mm.
And sort of like with truth, like when you're trying to be truthful, it means you're trying to line up with the ultimate standard of truth, right? So you're trying to reach that, and as a human being, trying to measure up to that idea.
Yeah. So I think you would say that truth is also like objective and never not changing, or would you say there's some aspects of it that are somewhat relative?
I think it depends on what you mean by truth.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that there is definitely, I think truth in terms of ideals and standards, that kind of thing, sort of not platonic or whatever, but in that sense, things make more sense if we think about them in terms of there being ultimate truths to which we have to measure up. But there's also relative elements to truth, or subjective elements to truth, which is your own ability to feel a certain way about that, or certain personal truths that might vary or whatever, depending on even like your mood or day-to-day experiences or whatever. Or even the way you perceive that truth can be subjective.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, like, to me, my truth is... No, I'm kidding.
well, that's not my truth. So.
Dude, I don't believe that. But I see it as there is an objective capital T truth. It's not changing. But I think for humans, for us, your belief in truth is more, we value that more than truth itself.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, as an example, I like to use this to, that's what I'm talking about. One weekend, I was at home, so was my sister, and she made cake pops. Well, then she left one day. She came back, they were all gone. I didn't eat any, but she assumed I did, and so she believes it to be true that I did, when I know I didn't, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
So that means that the belief in what you perceive to be true is, you either value higher or has more power than truth itself.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because we don't see capital T truth acted out in the world, because that's an ultimate standard kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we see is people's beliefs acted out in the world. So the truth that she was living up to, though it might not have coordinated with reality, for her was as real as anything else could have been, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes sense. So what we see acted out in reality is belief, you know?
Yeah.
And so you kind of can measure things based on how well those beliefs coordinate with transcendent ideals or whatever it might be. So, but there's always going to be a distinction between real life versus the ideals or whatever.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you believe that people can have their own, like, kind of relative personal truths. Like, what's an example of that?
I would say is I love my wife more than anybody else. But if you said I love your wife more than anybody else, that would probably be a problem. Like, that would be pretty weird, you know what I mean? I got married to my wife in 2017. If you're like, I got married to your wife in 2017, that's
well,
not right.
Is that, like, really relative, though? Because if I don't know. If you say you love your wife more than anyone else in the world, but if I say that you love your wife more than everyone else in the world, that still aligns with the truth.
Yeah, that's a statement about me. Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. But I guess it's just in the terms of, I guess a different way to put it would be in terms of the subjective perspective of truth. Like, you know that I love my wife, you know.
Yeah.
But
I guess
your experience of that truth is different than mine, right? Hopefully.
Yeah. So I guess what you mean is, like, you can know that you love your wife more than anyone else, but if, like, say you went to some place in public, you got in disagreement, and a bystander saw it, they might think that you hate your wife.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So people can believe in the same truth, but believe in that truth differently, right? So yeah, I think that's an example of.
But would you say that's more like there's still the objective truth, but people are just creating their own truths? I guess that's what I'm saying. Belief is more important.
I guess I can put it this way: if we're going to get into the ideals thing, you can talk to two different. Let's just take Christianity, right? You can talk to two Christians that are different people about God, and they might have a totally different, not in the terms of belief of what that God's definition would be, but in terms of how they experience or relate to God, right? They might have different definitions of, they might see it from more of an emotional perspective or more of an intellectual perspective or that kind of thing. They're both talking about the same thing, but they experience that reality differently.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like your subjective, it kind of depends on where you're standing, right? I don't expect everyone to have a Francis Schaeffer, C.S. Lewis perspective on God, right? But that doesn't mean that multiple people can't have different interpretations or different perspectives on God and be correct. Especially with something as complex and multifaceted as ideals and truth.
Yeah. Because
there's so many different ways to look at it. You know, it's like kind of like looking at like a diamond or whatever. There's different ways that you can look at it, different colors that come out of that. But whenever you look at it in different angles, but it's still the same diamond, right? Okay, so people, based on their own intrinsic nature, view reality differently. But that's not necessarily a negative thing, even if they're looking at the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where you get ideas. Sorry to get on a tangent.
No, it's fine.
But that's where you get ideas like the importance of community, or like you talk about the classical view, if we're going to follow the Christianity thing, of like churches, because they each person has a different perspective and different operating purpose in the church or whatever it might be, or whatever your body of believers might be,
Yeah.
because they all serve a different purpose because they're all different people.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Right. Now, let's see. Pull my notes. So let's get to how you feel about postmodernism, like their idea of truth. But first, let's go back to the beginning of the Enlightenment.
Okay.
Okay. So, as we all know, like Enlightenment, they're all like, there's a truth out there, and we can find it.
Well, they're all white dudes, so why do I care what they say anyway? Just kidding. Yeah, exactly. No, go ahead. Sorry, continue.
I mean, so they were all about trying to find this perfect, capital T truth, as we said one day in class, or like this objective truth.
Yeah.
Of like moralities and just everything. Do you think that we are like actually rational humans that can rationally get to that true idea of perfect truth and perfect morality, or like not? Because the way I see it as we might have the capacity for rationality, but I don't think we are completely like rational creatures to be able to think completely and rationally, like completely objectively to the point to where it can be like, yeah, this is what good is, or this is what bad is. Because the way I always see it is, I like to say, like if someone lies, they know lying is bad, but in their head, to get to that point, they're like, well, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's actually for the better. And they can rationalize something that's immoral, which would be rational. Yeah.
I think an easy way to think about it too is, I think the problem with the Enlightenment, if I'll put it this way, they assumed for a lot of them, let's go back to even like Descartes, cognito ergo sum. He's trying to find the basic equalitative idea of humanity, something that we can all share, and they go to reason, right? Which is our own consciousness and reason. And the problem with that is that they took the fumes of Christianity that were still left in that culture for granted. And what I mean by that is they assumed that people using only reason would come to some kind of virtuous conclusion.
Yeah.
But the thing is, morality is not inherently rational, right? I mean, think about it. We can take it from this perspective. One of the things that gives rise to modernism is the realization of the extreme depravity of humanity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so let's push it even further a little bit. You could say the most cultured, the most enlightened, the most intellectually powerful, creating the best musicians, the best cultural movements, whatever. One of the best, well, let's go ahead and say the best, probably the best, would be the Germans pre-World War II. You've got all the great musicians, all like German Romanticism, all this kind of stuff. It's crazy. And then that culture gives rise to Nazism, one of the worst evils of all humankind ever. So, and I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of people in realizing, wow, Enlightenment doesn't always lead to the virtuous utopia that we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it from just a general human perspective, charity and love and kindness are not rational things. They're rational in terms of like just survival of your family, but if you try to expand that to any kind of outside of your clan or group idea, it breaks down. It doesn't make any sense. That's why, I mean, so I think that's one of the issues with the Enlightenment is it took virtue and the desire for the good as just something that was basic for humanity, which I don't think it's that simple.
Okay, yeah.
And you even see that as the culmination of the Enlightenment and the conclusion. That's basically Nietzsche's entire philosophy, which is God is dead. Once you rip God from that foundational perspective of what is good and what is true and what is beautiful, what does society look like after that? What happens if you remove that? What is virtue now? It's just will to power. It's just the desire to become greater and bigger and more powerful than the next guy. which is there's a reason why the Nazis were so influenced by his philosophy and by that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I feel like that was a decent transition into kind of the modernist idea.
Gotcha.
Where they start thinking, maybe this truth thing isn't real.
Yeah.
Because everything sucks balls.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, well, let's. We might kind of merge postmodernism and modernism, kind of mix the two. Because it's here. Because I think let's also talk about meaning just for a little bit. Because I feel like meaning is associated with truth.
Oh yeah, of course.
We went over these paintings in World Thought 3. It was I can't believe forgetting the artist's name. You know the guy that did the Son of Man, where it's the guy in the bowler hat with the apple?
Yeah, with the apple in front of his face?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was.
I'll look it up and put like a graph.
Yeah.
His name.
It'll be right here.
Yeah. But the entire day's lecture was about how he claimed that all of his works had no meaning to them.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone was like, but there's got to be meaning to it.
Yeah.
He was like, but there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Which, to me, maybe thinks that maybe the fact that there's no meaning is the meaning. Like, there is the Beatles song, I Am the Walrus.
Yeah.
That's complete gibberish.
Yeah.
But I believe they wrote that song because someone talked about how in their class they kept analyzing for meanings and all that, and they thought it's kind of funny to write a song with no meaning, and so that kind of became their purpose and meaning to writing that song.
And see what kind of stuff people get out of it or whatever. Yeah, for
like,
sure.
And they're like, well, there's nothing there, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely see that, because I think in terms of meaning, it's inextricably tied to the idea of truth.
Mm.
And so I think what modernism was, the way I see it, and you see this most clearly in what gave rise to modernism, which is the World War I poets, right? And then eventually all those poets come home from war totally desensitized to reality.
Yeah.
And they start becoming, the E.E. Cummings, the T.S. Eliot's, whatever.
Mm.
And I do love T.S. Eliot. But the issue with modernism, it's the realization that, yes, we need to use reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean that reason will bring about utopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what did reason bring in World War I? More death than had ever occurred in a war before that,
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it was just the technology, things like Fritz Haber with mustard gas and all that kind of stuff, that it was like the Enlightenment made the suffering worse than in previous wars,
Yeah.
And I mean Enlightenment in terms of the scientific revolution and things like that. So I think that when you get people in the modernist movement and then eventually the existentialists, it comes down to, okay, well, the world is an inherently dark place, full of suffering. Suffering is just what it is. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And so you get I think that kind of encapsulates the idea of modernism. I think that existentialism is a response to that, which says, okay, if you're going to have meaning, you have to find it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you get Sartre that's like, oh, well, the way to find meaning in the world is to know that you're Sisyphus, like eternally in hell, pushing a boulder up a hill and letting that boulder fall back down.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to do it with a smile on your face, Just as long as you're happy about the fact that you're in hell, then it's okay, And so I think postmodernism really is just the next step from modernism, which says the reality is complex. That's true. And people don't always come to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe because there are so many different interpretations of reality, no interpretation of reality is better than another. I think that's really where postmodernism comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the denial of truth, but it's also the denial of interpretational hierarchies. It's the denial of values in terms of one interpretation of the world can be better than another.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I see where you're coming from. I mean, that one person's view of the world is better than someone else's.
Which, I mean, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So if I was listening to something the other day that was really helpful on this. If there's no better perspective of the world, it means there's also no such thing as redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by... I just mean in the sense of personal redemption.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea in Christianity, which is that... and I think it's really important even to Western culture itself, that the judge and the redeemer are the same figure. They're the same person, right?
Okay.
And what that means is, just in terms of like personal betterment or whatever, is that in order to become a better person, you have to be able to look at your vices and things that are wrong with you, judge those things, and cast them out, right? You have to be able to throw those things away, to look at the parts of you that need to be redeemed, and then strive for that. And so the problem with the idea that all interpretations of reality are equal is that it leaves everyone equally miserable. Like the idea that like you're just okay exactly as you are. Like, no, you're not. you suck as you are. You know what I mean? There's no purpose to life, and there's no meaning in life if you're not striving to become better than you are.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think postmodernism denies that capability, because you have to be able to, if someone's gonna become better than they are, you have to be able to tell them you're not okay as you are right now.
Okay.
And that's not politically correct nowadays to say for a lot of people, but I think that might be what's wrong with a lot of people's just inner sense of depression and being desensitized to reality, loneliness, things like that. So I think that's the thing when people talk about, like, say even like marriage, like find someone that takes you as you are. To hell with that, man. Like, that's a terrible idea. Like, that's a stupid idea. Because no one wants to be married. Nobody that's married when they're 60 wants to be continue to be married to the person that they married when they were 19. You know what I mean? Nobody wants that. And so, that's the thing. Personal betterment, I think, is what postmodern philosophy lacks. And what exactly that looks like. Because if there's no ultimate transcendent ideal, it means there's nothing ultimately to strive for. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, to oppose your marriage analogy, what about all those guys that get divorced and married someone half their age? No, I'm just
exactly. Don't forget it, you know.
They still won't be married to someone that's still 24.
Exactly. Good point. Good point.
You know. I'm kind of maybe changing gears a little bit. It's still kind of relating to what you hear about how people can view the world differently. Okay, it's still good on time.
Cool.
You're aware of the Flat Earthers movement, right?
Sweet.
Yeah. Hang on there. So, like, obviously they believe that the truth that we've been given that the world is round in a sphere is false. And they're doing scientific research, as they see it, to confirm their own beliefs that the world is flat.
Is it not? Sorry, go ahead.
Like, there's a documentary on Netflix called, I think it's Beneath the Dome, and there's a part in there where they literally set up an experiment involving like a gyrosphere and then like waiting time because it can measure if the Earth is rotating or not, because if it's flat it wouldn't rotate, but if it's a sphere it would. And so they set up this experiment. They said they need this super powerful gyrosphere. But someone in their town bought them one, like spent thousands of dollars, and they did the test, and they proved the world was round. But they continue to not believe in that and continue their own disbelief.
Confirmation bias, basically.
Yeah, confirmation bias. And that. So would you say like maybe this idea of truth can be relative, maybe not exactly to them, but like maybe that flat earthers are kind of like postmodern Enlightenment thinkers?
Yeah.
Because while we know that they're believing something that's not capital T truth, they believe that they are, and they're searching for it and trying to.
In spite of evidence that they're given,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, even the documentary, they proved twice that the world is round.
They're still trying, though.
Yeah,
I gotta give them credit for that. You know,
yeah.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I found they're going to be at the end. Like, I found 2,000 ways to prove that the world is round. But only one way to prove that it was flat, and that's what matters. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's also what's weird is postmodernism also denies the value of the scientific method.
Yeah.
That's what's weird is like, the way I kind of see it is that before, with the Enlightenment, you have people that are trying to strive for reality just with reason.
Mm-hmm.
Modernism, postmodernism starts to phase toward looking at the reality of the world through the lens of experience, right? We all have our different experiences or whatever. The problem is, once you go purely to experience, it's very hard now to start using arguments and evidence based on reason, because we've denied as a culture for so long the reality of truth, even through reason. And so once you go to experience, it undercuts the idea of truth itself too. What I was thinking of too in terms of the postmodernism thing, it also undercuts the value or the possibility or the existence of actual evil, right? And I think what has changed, where people are starting to move away from postmodernism, is that you can turn on the news whenever you want and see actual evil play out in front of you. Nobody's going to be like, well, the Columbine shooters, they had, like, their perspective. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Think about it, though. Nobody's going to sit and turn on the news and be like, that's just a different way of looking at the world. I've never thought about it that way. You know what I mean? That's not their truth. That's wrong, right? And I think we're growing up in a society that are some of our earliest memories is, like, the wake of 9/11, right? And remembering that moment of evil, right?
Yeah.
I was just studying Japanese torture of POWs today, and that stuff is actually evil. Like, if you ever look at Unit 731, that stuff is legitimately evil, And I think the negative side of that is, yes, absolute evil exists, and that sucks. You know what I mean? That gives us all the reason in the world that we could ever need never to leave our house. You know what I mean? But also, the existence of evil necessitates the idea of truth and of goodness, right? Because it is a true statement to say that Unit 731 was evil. But it also gives you an idea of, if you have an idea of two polar realities, one which is, this is what evil looks like. This is suffering, this is torture, this is pain, this is school shootings, whatever. And then you have the other side of that, on the other side of the pendulum, you have an idea of, well, decreasing in the suffering of the world might not be such a bad thing. Maybe that's a rough idea of what good should look like. Then you have an idea of what progress looks like, because you can look and say, okay, this is what the good looks like, and this is what evil is. Let's try to create a world in which this is less common and this is more common. Let's move people toward this. Let's move myself toward that.
But back on they were like, obviously this is evil. Well, at the time they didn't think that was evil. They thought, well, this is for our greater good. It might not be good, but
exactly, yeah,
for the greater good. So like, when that kind of undermine your, well, this is truth that this is evil. They thought, well, it might not be so bad.
Well, it depends on your definition of the greater good, right? So if their greater good is to create some kind of Aryan race or whatever, which then would have built into that idea mass genocide. You know what I mean? That's something that can be judged, I think, rationally and in terms of virtue to be clearly evil, right? And I think that you can get to the point as a culture where you can be so caught up in bad rhetoric and bad ideas, and you can even say evil ideas, that becomes normative. But I don't think people, just based on their own natural inclinations and instinct, are going to think, genocide is a pretty good thing. You really have to get to a point in order to think that that's fine. You know what I mean? And that's one of those things I don't really know if it's that. It's the kind of thing, am I going to sit here and argue the reality that genocide is evil? Do we have to do that? You know what I mean? We can do that all day long.
Yeah.
But any sane person is going to go ahead and admit that that's pretty much self-evident. Mass murder, not a good thing.
Sure, this is still recording. No.
Wait, when did it stop recording?
Oh, no, it's fine. All right.
Was it recording at all?
I mean, the audio's still recording. So we'll stop audio, but I'll just come back. Well, anyways, we're about out of time.
This has been great. I've enjoyed this a lot.
Thanks. Thanks for doing this.
Cool, man.
Cool.
All right. See you guys next time.